Hello, everyone. This is Kops Office Hours. It is June 8th, 2018. We have a fairly light agenda for the day. The link is in the link to the agenda. I will repaste it for people that joined later. The link is in the chat, and if you have items you would like to talk about, please put them in the agenda. The main thing on the agenda is I'm planning to cut our first Kops 110 alpha. So we're trying to get onto a schedule where we have alphas closer to the release of Kubernetes, but we are behind on that still, but we're playing catch up. We're getting closer. Always getting closer. And so we're looking pretty good on 110 on our, I think we failed to make progress, but we haven't fallen further behind. So we're sort of on our perpetual next release of Kops sort of around the next release of Kubernetes. But we're going to try to make progress on that. etcd manager, I think, was the big blocker this time. And that hopefully will be better. But anyway, hoping to cut the 110 alpha train this weekend. So if there's any PRs in particular that you want to get in or that are important and I've overlooked or anything like that, please mention them now, or make sure that they are marked as 110. Well, PRs marked as 110, ideally with blocks next if they are that important. I'm definitely going to do a pass on all the 110 PRs and hopefully get in anything that we can get in or should get in. And otherwise, I think, Andrew, you had a query about the version of 110.
Yeah, well, I've got a PR that I'm not sure if it's in or not. Do you want to talk about that first, or version of 110?
Which PR, Chris?
Is the IAM PR finally merged? Or do I just need to go and merge it?
Let's have a look. Is there a particular one? I think actually I was looking for it and I couldn't find it, so I'm guessing it just merged. There was a PR which I said we could merge and had an issue, but I guess someone has merged it. But if not, please let me know and I will make sure that we...
Peter's on the phone.
I'm fairly certain it is not merged.
Can you please Slack Justin and I in a group message with that PR? Justin, if you don't get to it today, I will merge it tonight.
Is this 4171?
That sounds right. I'm not at my computer right now, but I can check it in a minute.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Yeah, that would be great. I think that was the one which we discussed, and we agreed basically. Yes, that is it. Right there it is. I just missed that for some reason. I'm sorry. So yes, it looks like there's a conflict, but hopefully I can maybe fix that in the web editor if I have permission to do that. But I will leave that open and merge it hopefully after this meeting. But yes, that is a good one to bring up. There are also a couple of OpenStack and Aliyun PRs, which I presume no one would object if I merged. Not. And otherwise, I'm not aware of anything massive still to go in. But yeah, Andrew, you have a query about version of 110.
Yeah, so in version 0.0, 0.1, and 0.2, there's a bug that if you're an external cloud provider, it disables Node IPAM allocation, which is pretty important for a lot of the CNI plugins. So yeah, I'm just kind of verifying, like if we know for sure that we're going to be doing 1.10.3 and greater, then that'd be great. There's also a bug with mount propagation that was causing a lot of issues. And I think that was also fixed in 0.3.
So Andrew, we can't guarantee that 110.3 will be installed. We can definitely make stable that.
You can make it the default.
But we need some release notes. Yeah, so we can make it the stable channel, right? So you can PR the, right now you could PR the alpha channel with 110, right? The correct version that you want. And then we'll just move that to stable. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So let me mention. So what we have these channels concepts. There are two files: channels alpha, channels stable. Each version of Kops can recommend a version of Kubernetes.
Yeah.
And so we tend to put then the latest versions of Kubernetes as they're released into the alpha channel first, and then promote them once we feel that they're stable into the stable channel. So typically when I do a release, I will also update the alpha channel at the same time. I'm just looking at what's currently in alpha and what's in, so we currently have recommended 1.10.3 in alpha. I don't know if we have it in stable yet. We don't have anything in stable, but when we promote it, it will start at 1.10.3.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and there's also another mechanism we have, which is we can require a Kubernetes version. So if, for example, a 1.6.0 had a bad security flaw, we could require 1.6.1. And then if you try to install it, Kops will basically yell at you. You can still bypass it with an environment variable, but it's sort of like we really make it very obvious. But that's really reserved for very serious issues.
Yeah, that seems pretty handy.
So which one is it? Is it a recommended, Andrew, or is it a, oh my God, this won't work?
Yeah, so I understand that, like, we can't, like, I think it should be recommended, just because I don't think, first of all, like, DigitalOcean is still alpha, so it's not gonna, I don't think we should block versions because of that. But also, like, I understand that we can't force anyone not to use those versions, but I feel like as long as the default is a version that works and is stable for everyone, that would be great. So yeah, recommended works for me.
That's good. And we certainly could look at, like, in future making the required rule set more advanced. But to me, I agree that as long as it's not a serious security issue or something of that nature, that we can just recommend the latest version. If people don't upgrade or people choose to install an earlier version, that's sort of on them. It could be more obvious, but we can make that better rather than, yeah. But yeah, and I think we're okay. We need to promote alpha to stable anyway, and when we do, it will pick up 1.10.3 currently.
Hey, Andrew, what I'm hearing from you, and correct me if I'm wrong, DO won't work with anything but 1.10.3. Is that what you're saying?
So because the change was went in between, like, somewhere in 1.10, like, it works fine in 1.9, but it'll break in 1.10.0.1 and .2. But then we get the cherry pick in .3, so it'll only work from .3 and greater.
Yeah. All right, so that is an issue with your cloud provider. I would recommend, and Justin, you can tell us what you think, please. I would recommend putting in code to stop people that are using DO to use the wrong versions.
So it's not necessarily a cloud provider issue. It's more of like, so it's a configuration issue on the kube controller manager that disables a certain controller that we need.
Right.
So, like,
but let me put it a different way. Sorry, I interrupted you, but I made a bad statement. Cloud provider as in Kops DO.
Yes.
All right. So it does not work with these two versions in Kops DO. I would recommend putting code into Kops to stop people from using the wrong versions with DigitalOcean only.
Sure.
Or else it's gonna create support tickets for you, dude.
Yeah, I mean,
Justin.
Again, like, if the recommended is .3, I don't think,
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's gonna explicitly want to run .2 for whatever reason. So,
yeah, I'd say certainly if you wanted Andrew to put in code to do that, you'd be welcome to do so. I feel that until you see people that are actively, like, going against the recommended, then
yeah,
I agree with you, it's probably not worth it.
Yeah, and again, like, DO support is alpha, so if something breaks, I don't really care. I mean, like, they can fix it themselves.
Certainly, if they start messing with, if they start going on different versions,
Exactly.
and yeah, they should be not surprised if things don't work.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. I don't know if anyone put anything else on the agenda for today. We have some. Oh, perfect. We have Vahibab. Is that how you say your name? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah, I understand. It's a little harder to pronounce. My name is Vaibhav Patel, and I wanted to introduce myself. I work at Microsoft on Azure Stack, and it was just last night that I started browsing the repo, and I think the problem that Kops solves actually is very pertinent to Azure Stack. So Azure Stack, if you guys, if I may take like 5 minutes to just give it a little intro. Okay. So Azure Stack is basically a hybrid cloud solution from Microsoft and more of an on-premise solution. And think of that as a mini Azure on-premise. And I've been working on the ACS engine, which is the provisioning of Kubernetes on Azure. Having said that, the admin persona for deploying, managing, and upgrading the cluster is more of an in-house thingy. People have gone overboard in creating custom scripts to just do that behind the scenes, because there's no customer actually getting to do that. However, for Azure Stack, it's actually pretty important that since we are giving it to a customer, we need to support an admin persona, something that like a Kops utility, where once the customer is deployed the cluster on Azure Stack, they want to manage it by themselves. And so for us, for me specifically, there is a vested interest to actually start contributing towards Kops, and I see that there is no Azure support to begin with, and I'm I understandably, because I think there's a lot of overlap between what ACS engine does and what Kops does. And I reached out to a few ACS engine folks saying, guys, why are we not on Kops? And it's like very low on their priority list, given that there's so much overlap. Having said that, for us, it's actually pretty important that we actually get on site. Now, I just want to give a little bit of comparison. If Azure is Windows 10, then Azure Stack is Windows 95. And so we don't have a lot of functionality that Azure already has, given that we run on a specific hardware, right? But having said that, if my team manages to bring Kops on board on Azure Stack, it will be just a flip switch to go back to Azure, just because they're using so much everything latest. We're currently, to give you a bit of a status right now on Azure Stack, we're able to run Kubernetes 1.789 with ACS engine provisioning it. And we are just strictly using all the IaaS capabilities. So just primary compute storage and a little bit of SDN network from the Azure resource provider. But having said that, it seems like Kops is already doing the networking by themselves, using the Calico or Flannel or some other sort of SDN providers. And so if my first goal right now is to just figure out what are the dependencies that Kops would need to deploy the Kubernetes cluster besides compute and storage. And I started browsing the repo, and I see that there is you guys have embedded the AWS SDK and Google Cloud SDK. So the first step is probably to embed the Azure CLI SDK, and then at least start making calls to see if we can connect to storage, create blobs, create configurations and whatnot, and then sort of move further from that. Again, I'm not really too much prepared for this. I just figured there's a call happening, and I figured I'll log in, and I don't really know too much about Kops, but I'm just browsing the repo and just getting acquainted by myself. If you guys have any pointers, I'm sure you've done an excellent job in documenting, so I'll make sure I'll go through that.
Well, I think we're very lucky actually, because we have Andrew who did this very recently for DigitalOcean, and I wouldn't want to comment on my documentation, but so Andrew can put a face that expresses his opinion of that. Yeah, it would be wonderful to have Azure support, and I will be very happy to help however I can. I think what you've described in terms of if you're able to try it out on AWS or GCP, just to see the way that the files are basically stored on S3 or GCS, and that is used sort of by the machines as they boot up. And I think that's the case also for DO, right, Andrew?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is indeed the first requirement. And a good place to start would be to write a sort of simple VFS implementation for, I don't know the name of Azure's equivalent product, but Azure Files or something, let's guess.
Yeah, I think Azure Blob Storage is one. And yeah, I mean, that's good. Actually, I will, that was my first thing also on the other list of to just do an deploy it on a Google Cloud or AWS, and just sort of, get what are the things that happens under the hood. And then definitely, that's also.
And then
there's issue 3957, which actually I opened. There is a partial start of an implementation by gentleman Perryao. I think it's kind of stalled. Yes, awesome that you're here. Question: are you going to get time from Microsoft to work on this, or is this on your own?
So currently this is on my own. I was trying to actually get a few people from ACS Engine team, but because they said this is lower priority. So my goal right now is to really provide some proof of concept that Kops is a good alternative, and then sort of take it to my management saying, guys, we should be doing this, and then sort of get more leverage and have more people work on it. So right now I'm just trying to get my hands dirty with this and sort of make my case to actually get more people work with
So
me.
Please ping me directly on Slack. It's Chris Love CNM. I've got some backstory for you.
Okay.
So
if you mind typing your alias on the chat, I didn't quite catch that.
Yeah.
I would also mention two things, if I may. One of them is there's an effort you may be interested in, which is the cluster API or the machines API, which is because the tricky bit is sort of provisioning one of the tricky pieces is provisioning the cloud objects, right? And the machines API is trying to bring that, or the cluster API is trying to bring that into the Kubernetes API ecosystem, and Kops is trying to adopt that. And so that may be a good way to proceed, but sort of maybe a bit more medium term. A shorter term tactic is you'll see when you get into the code, and maybe we should schedule a call to talk through it or do something like that. But you'll see that Kops creates a model and then has tasks, which are similar to Terraform tasks.
Okay.
And those tasks can either execute directly in Kops, or it can generate Terraform. On AWS, it can generate CloudFormation. An option may be to have the tasks, but not implement the direct execution and just have rendering to ACS Engine. I don't know if that makes sense, or just have rendering to Terraform, which was actually sort of much easier to get going with.
There was one vector that I was thinking, which was to not do a whole lot of re-implementation and sort of use ACS Engine. Again, I was trying to get familiar to, but I definitely see the value, and I think that will be an easier sell for me rather than saying here's a whole complete rewrite and complete different alternative of ACS Engine. So sure.
Yeah, it's going to be kind of challenging to integrate ACS Engine into the Kops model. We use an async task model. I don't think it's, realistically, like Andrew, how many total hours can you say? Like, did it take you 100 coding hours or 80 coding hours to knock out DO? What do you think?
Yeah, so hard to say because it was kind of like,
I know it's over like
a year,
months, right?
So, yeah, like I was kind of like it was in my free time, so I just kind of worked little bits at a time. Whenever I had time, so I can't say, but I just linked in the chat the umbrella issue so there's a DigitalOcean support umbrella issue, and I pretty much linked that issue to all the work I've done, so you can kind of go through that
awesome.
issue.
Oh, nice. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I think you probably copy paste most of it, just replacing the DigitalOcean bits with whatever you need.
I think I probably am very in a similar boat as Andrew, it seems like, and I definitely want to get more leverage by just proving something real quick and sort of showing that value. And really, for us, it's if there is a customer asked to do this, then I will get enough leverage. The only reason is right now, since we have an alternative of ACS Engine, there is not a much of leverage, but to me, it makes so much sense that if Kops has, the ACS Engine can only work on Azure, right? And so if I brought it in, if Kops, if we replaced it, then it makes life so much easier from a customer end. So totally.
And I think rendering, if ACS Engine works the same way as Terraform, I think rendering to ACS Engine may be possible, and maybe, well, certainly easier than writing the direct execution, which is basically re-implementing ACS Engine. And that might also make the ACS Engine team a little more amenable to like the approach, right?
Right.
Also,
there's goods and bads. As in, Azure Stack doesn't have to support the entire Azure story, and vice versa, and which is why I think both can still live on. There's AKS, which actually has a heavy dependency on ACS Engine, and so it's not like if we had an alternative, ACS Engine will render worthless. It's just that for they don't have enough motivation to go overboard on ACS engine just for Azure Stack. So I am looking out for Azure Stack from both fronts.
Awesome. Well, yes, I'm very happy to help you however I
Yeah,
can. Do you have are you on Slack?
I'll definitely join. Like I said, I just saw that today is an odd number week and there's going to be a conference I just logged in.
Okay, cool. And I'm Justin SB on Slack as well.
Thank you so much, guys. I'll definitely join and I'll ping you guys. Thank you so much.
Great to have you.
Yeah.
There's nothing else on the agenda. Or nothing else written on the agenda. I don't know if anyone else wants to bring up anything.
With the Kubernetes 110, are we bumping to stretch?
As far as I know, no. I have no. I think this came up, but I don't know of any reason to, and we haven't been running our ED test with stretch. We still sort of have time, I guess, but I don't have any plan to right now.
I would rather focus on getting over to Amazon Linux for our Amazon image, because I know that's being beat up by the EKS folks. So I think that would be a better strategy personally, but that's just my 2 cents worth.
I mean, it's a big deal to. Yeah, I think we need to support Stretch and Amazon Linux. I think. Yeah. Hopefully, ideally, one day everyone would be using an image we don't have to support, but Amazon Linux is CentOS, and the image we build is Debian based, so that's a pretty big switch for people to, it's a pretty big change to force on people. So that has to take place in a measured way.
Do we still have issues open with Stretch?
What do you mean by issues open? We have an E2E test, I believe, that was failing because we think not a real fail, but a test failure.
We were at least having problems with the NVE blah 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 controller?
NVMe.
M5. Is anybody running like M5s or C5s on the call?
I'm running them for the nodes, not the masters.
Okay, and are you having any problems with Stretch, Shane?
I'm using CoreOS.
You don't count then, damn it. Of course you're using CoreOS. So that would be a no.
We'll get this into E2E anyway, and I mean we should have E2E for, like, it's pretty clear that most of a lot of the new AWS instances are using NVMe. So we should have NVMe tests, I guess, for all the images we think we support.
Does AWS have end-to-end tests yet on their image?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
But I think it works, so that's good.
Hey,
E2E, bit different.
I'm Rob from Cisco. I think we have C5s in one of our clusters, and I could check and let you know in Slack, but we haven't had any issues.
Yeah, if you could, if you are running it well, if you would open an issue to upgrade the stable channel to Stretch in Kops and give us feedback with that, that would be awesome.
I'll double check when I get logged into the VPN.
Yeah, there is a note in the channels that we break tests. We can't do it because of the tests right now. So that's actually the bigger. It's a sort of minor hurdle. It's not even a real test failure, but it's the way that we parse something to do with connection tracking or something has changed in like the different kernel versions, and we just need to fix that.
Hey Rodrigo, are you running C5s or M5s?
No, I have my own internal issues with those.
That's right. You're not running Stretch. You're running your own special Pinterest version.
Yeah.
Awesome. Now, I don't know if anyone else has anything else, or whether everyone gets half an hour of their what is here a sunny Friday back.
Well, we've got a good crew here. Did we want to talk real quick about 111? Any features that anybody wants or is interested in working on?
Absolutely. If anyone would like to,
like getting DO to beta.
I hope 111 can be a shorter cycle. In other words, not a 3-month cycle, so that we can actually advance a little bit on the Kubernetes release. We'll see if we achieve that, but that is my hope. In theory, etcd manager is supposed to be the default, so that will be that will require a lot of E2E testing.
For 111 or for 110, Justin?
It's for 110, it's opt-in. For 111, it will be the default.
And does that include the upgrades from 2 to 3?
Upgrades will so once we make it the default, then we can default to etcd3. Upgrades will be possible. It may not, depending on the status, depending on whether we can get E2E testing of the upgrades, it may not necessarily be as golden as we would like. It is not having working upgrades is not a blocker to having etcd manager as the default in 111. And the deadline we have to hit is the 113 will not support etcd2 at all.
Yeah, well, hopefully we're way before that deadline. So
I mean, we're on track. I think we have one release of padding. I think is
gotta get rid of etcd2. So, anyways, Rodrigo, you've been playing with, but anybody else have any features that they're interested in working on or needs?
Yeah, I kind of have a quick one. I want to get the name tags on the auto scaling groups in AWS to not propagate. So I kind of need to create a secondary name tag specific for Kops that will propagate to the instances so that we can do instance discovery. I actually started thinking into that and kind of hit my head against the wall, but I'll ping you guys on Slack for more details on those.
Yeah, or open. I don't fully understand, but maybe open an issue and we can discuss on an issue as well.
So we have a process that goes through all instances and makes sure that who they belong to and blah, blah, blah. And part of that is they actually get their own naming. Like each instance has its own specific name. And because we have our own baking process for the instances, that automatically happens and whatnot. Unfortunately, Kops breaks that because we propagate the name tags for the ESGs. And I think I'm not the only one that's been hitting this issue. I've seen a couple other people open tickets on Kops for the similar issues anyways, so.
Oh, this is your CMDB. Is that what the system's called?
Yeah, correct.
You register your nodes. Any enterprise that has a CMDB is going to have a naming standard, most likely.
Yeah.
So,
and then we also have things that go through that and data from AWS in different places and does reconciliation for billing and a bunch of other purposes, internal billing and blah, blah, blah. So.
And you presumably have your own system that goes in externally from Kops and applies the names, right? Or who?
Correct. Yeah. So our own system goes and applies the name. And again, I'd rather do the name tag as a user's choice. So if a user chooses not to propagate, great, and it'll go and look at the second tag. But if they choose to keep the Kops name tag, that's fine as well.
Cool. And we've made some progress here, I think, in terms of tag flexibility. So yeah, let's like we did some of that for shared subnets, I think. So we have some, hopefully, if you open an issue, we can discuss it, and hopefully we're not too far off the beaten path.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Yeah, I support that PR coming in for you, Rodrigo. So
awesome.
Anybody else have stuff they want to work on? Elena or Peter or Mr. Splain, who's able to join us now?
Howdy. Long time no see, Chris.
I know. My current client has gobbled me up.
Hi, I'm Elena. So nothing I need to work on or need to bring to the attention of the group. Really just kind of new to my current company, new to Kops in general. Also, I have an interesting problem of trying to work with Spot's fork of Kops and trying to get that working for us in AWS. And so just trying to pick up, glean as much information as possible. So thanks for being available.
So the new Spot instance type or the current one that we support?
I believe the current one you support. I think I'm just trying to get it. It's new to our environment, so I'm just trying to bootstrap a cluster.
Yep.
But yeah, nothing. I think it's all stuff that you're aware about. I think it's just all new to me personally. So.
I'm sorry. Did you say? I thought you said the spot inst fork. Like, do you mean spot inst or spot instances?
Oh, sorry, Spot Inst, the company,
Right.
and their fork of Kops, and getting that to work in AWS.
Yes, it'd be great to get that in. It's a pretty big fork, a pretty big patch last time I looked. So yes, it'd be great to integrate those. We have to figure out.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how any of this works right now.
Elena, yell at the Spot Inst folks to get a good PR in for us, and we can get it into as a cloud provider.
Okay, I'll let them know in our support channel. Definitely.
Yeah, please yell at this. I've talked with the CTO directly, so holler at him and see if we can push on that. That way we can get it more supported, and they're not on their own fork.
Cool. I think it would be helpful. I guess it's like putting pressure on myself. I'll come join next time in 2 weeks. Let you know like what I learned if you don't hear anything. Definitely.
And is that patch working for you though?
So I just started on this week, and no, but again, this is just me new to Kops 1 and Spot Inst, the company 2. So I think this is just a lot of me just trying to figure out my own problems right now.
But you're not using their PR, you're using their fork, right?
So they've got like some getting started steps, and there's like a binary to install. So yeah,
you're using their fork.
Yes, using their fork.
It may be worth trying I haven't used their fork, so it may be worth trying the standard Kops thing to get familiar with how it works, and then you'll be sure that whatever issues are, whether the issues with Kops, in which case we can fix it, or whether it's at the fork, in which case we can work on the PR.
Well, I'll say this just to be charitable. Their install scripts work out of the box. I think I've added some extra layers of specialness that are now broken. So I don't want to waste too much of your time. I know I'm not doing my own like systems engineering thing that's probably messing me up somewhere. So.
You're not wasting our time at all, first off. We have nothing left on the agenda, so I appreciate the questions.
And one word of warning is if you change any code and try to build a custom code, it's a little tricky to get that to actually work. So probably ping me or someone else. I'm happy to answer on Slack or.
Yeah, I think for me it was just I wanted to say hello, and I'll probably be bothering you in Slack. Is probably what I wanted to say.
What about, hey, Justin, what about aliased IPs for GCE? Because that's preventing us to go, that's huge, right?
Yes, as a now Googler, I am working to figure out whether that should be a blocker or not. So yes, that is on my agenda.
For 110 or 111?
It's not going to make 110, so it's holding. GC is going to stay alpha for 110.
Yeah. So 111 would be awesome to see aliased IPs in.
Yeah, I don't know if there was either a PR or a work in progress PR where I tried doing it, and it has benefits, but it also imposes some complexity on the setup procedure. So working on that.
Justin, I'm curious, you mentioned earlier the machine API. Do you have a branch open with that effort underway, or is that just something that's you're daydreaming about right now, or what's the story?
So the cluster API and the machines API is a separate working group of the cluster lifecycle, and they have implementation or a reference implementation for, I think it spins up on Google Cloud. There is a very old branch of Kops somewhere that uses it, but it's pretty old at this point. So I need to rebase and get that going. It's not really the API itself isn't fully even alpha yet, and the Kops branch was sort of from an earlier version. If you're interested in working on it, if you ping me on Slack, I can try to find it for you. But that's sort of the status of it.
I'm curious what your before I try to convince my manager to give me time to work on it, what your vision is for its use in Kops going forward.
Absolutely. So the cluster API has two sort of portions. There's a cluster object and a machine object. To me, the machine object is very compelling. The machine object, I sort of think of that as like a pod, and then they build on top machine sets and machine deployments. And the idea is that then currently we have some logic in the, Kops CLI to do a rolling update, for example. And there's the autoscaler, the cluster autoscaler has some logic to look at how autoscaling groups work and figure it out from there. The big idea is if we put the machine concept into the Kubernetes API, that you can drive everything through Kubernetes API. You can do a rolling update through the Kubernetes API. You can rescale through the Kubernetes API. Cluster autoscaler can rescale through the Kubernetes API. So hopefully smart people will come up with other things that you can do through this API as well. So essentially it is putting the Kops instance group concept into your cluster so that you can manipulate on the fly. But it's also a Kubernetes standard object that will work across all tooling, whether you use Kops or Azure or AWS, or I don't want to say any tooling because I don't want to commit
Right.
to anything.
So it sounds like there's more work to be done in Kubernetes itself than there is in Kops to make use of this.
There's work on both sides. There's definitely interesting work on bringing up specifying a machine in the API is not terribly hard. What's a little bit more complicated is specifying the configuration of that machine. The Machines API currently basically has a big extension block in there where you can put in whatever provider-specific stuff you want. So we could effectively embed the Kops instance group in a machine. That's one way to do it.
Okay.
That's sort of the fuzziness. So it's relatively straightforward to implement the basics, but yeah, when there's coordination required to do more and more advanced things, like if you wanted to rolling upgrade and actually change your Kubernetes version, for example, that requires sort of both machine and software. It's more complicated. So.
Oh, yeah.
For cloud providers like DigitalOcean that don't support autoscaling groups, this is going to be a pretty big deal to use that.
Yeah.
Right.
Justin, when is it? So my hesitation is to not. It's like pre-alpha now, right? So my hesitation, it's going to change through alpha. When are they looking at beta?
I don't know.
It's a Chris Nova / other people question.
Yeah, we're not gonna like. We've learned our lesson about adopting things before they are beta, at least. I think the 1.6 annotations that we used that were alpha, that was painful, and so we're not gonna force anyone to use it, but it would be great to have, like as Andrew said, the functionality of auto scaling groups or the equivalent on any cloud or on bare metal. So we've talked for a long time about getting bare metal support up and running, and one of the problems there is abstracting out the hardware, as it were, for bare metal, and the Machines API is a nice way to do that. So that was where I was starting with the Machines API, is thinking, well, if we do it for bare metal, sure, that will be alpha in Kops. It doesn't matter if the underlying API is alpha because everything's alpha, so that's fine. But we're not going to switch AWS to force everyone to use the Machines API and machine deployments while it's still in alpha.
Yeah, definitely wait. Yeah, I wouldn't support a PR until it's in beta for one of the providers that's like flushed out, such as GCE or AWS or DO.
Yeah.
It sounds like maybe my time would be better spent right now just grokking what they're doing with that API and where it's going before.
They have a working group. I highly recommend attending it. Other providers have definitely jumped on the bandwagon. Quote unquote options that are not Kops.
And definitely, yeah, I highly recommend the working group meetings. It's on Wednesdays at I think it's 1
p.m. Eastern, I think.
1 p.m. Eastern. There we go.
It's on the master calendar in community, so you can get the invites. If you're part of SIG CLI or SIG cluster lifecycle, you'll get the invites automatically.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great question. I hear silence, Justin.
Actually, related to that, there is the PR for rollout strategies, 4038, and I'm not sure, that kind of overlaps with the Machines API and stuff, but if If it's not obsolete by that, it would be good to get this in for 111.
It's not ready. It's not. Well, it'd be great to get it in for 111. We need to. I pinged the owner recently. Let me take an action item to corner him on Slack. What was the number again?
4038.
Are you interested in working on that?
I haven't looked into the source code at all, but I could certainly take a look, and if it's not too much work, I could probably consider tackling it.
It is not trivial. Actually, I would love for you to ping Gamble. So he's in London time, but he's usually on Slack. Him and Kosh, I forget his name, but they're big users of Kops. So do you mind reaching out to him, Peter, or would you rather me?
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, we do have to figure out whether exactly as you say, how the PR fits in with the effort with the machine.
Well, can we model it? Can we model it so that we could just drop in the machine APIs when they're ready?
I mean, in theory, it's just everything we put in, we have to make sure is supportable in the machine's API, which it should be, because conversely, the machine's API wants to, so we have a real world user that has submitted a PR that adds real world functionality that other people say is useful as well. And the machine's API also wants to have the same level of support for real world use cases. We have to do it. So
the main problem, Peter, with that is that he's making new instance groups, objects, and we don't want that. We kind of want a history like with replica sets with deployments, right? You know how you can roll back replica set or roll forward replica set history is tracked within the deployment object. Does that make sense? So that we need to have a new ASG, but not a new instance group. Does that make sense? That was the main problem with that PR.
Yeah, so, and when and if the machine's API arrives, then it will have that 3-tier notion, I guess.
I'm guessing a year. It's not even alpha yet, right?
There's I don't want to say like a circular dependency, right? We need to get it into real world usage before it can and make sure that it works before we want to declare it stable. But we also don't want to put it into Kops until it's locked or more locked. So that's why I think the way to break that might be to say, well, bare metal or something like that, right? Or some other platform that we currently don't support, or it wants to adopt it. Like if DO chooses to adopt it, right? But we're not going to force it on DO, but we can add support for a brand new platform.
Yeah, happy to do it, you guys, whenever it's ready.
Yeah, but this, yeah, it'd be great if you want to.
Yeah, like at least for Kops, like not to force it on everyone on DO, but happy to do it for Kops.
That would be cool. All right.
Justin, your Google work, is that public? Can you talk about it, or because I think it impacts Kops? The stuff, the paper that Brian Grant wrote and all that stuff, is it public yet?
I mean, I am generally looking at like add-on management and like Kops and all of this sort of space. It's not that I have a massive chunk of secret code.
Right, but add-ons manager is public. That's what I was asking. What type of timeline are you looking with that? Because it would be awesome to have Kops prove that out for you.
I think it'd be great to have Kops prove that out. I think you know, I've done some public like POCs that do elements of that and trying to figure out it's mostly about figuring out whether we circulating the idea of, well, figuring out what approach we should take in circulating the idea and how customize fits into that. Customize is a nice way to do patches, I guess you'd describe them, or overlays on a manifest. So it sort of solves the problem that in open source, particularly, there's always a user out there somewhere in the world that wants to customize every field. And if you have a template model, you end up with every field in your template being another variable declaration. You end up with like a different language. And so patches and overlays allow you to use the same language to express those changes, which is really cool.
Is everybody familiar with what you're talking about, by the way?
I'll drop a link into Customize, which actually explains a lot better than I can hope to do. And then, also looking at the role of operators for add-ons and generally. So that's what I'm dealing with. This is Customize.
Well, let me give a high-level overview. Justin's working with basically replacing our channels add-ons manager with a Kubernetes level add-ons manager, which would take care or basically be open source supported. So we would be able to get rid of parts of channels for stuff like DNS, CNI, anything else that's installed. So I'm really excited about, frankly, Justin.
But I mean, just set expectations. I've been looking at this problem for a long time, even before I joined Google. So yes, it is great to be at Google and have more time to work on it. But there's also more requirements now than just going and writing something cool.
I thought you were also the etcd czar.
That is more personal than my Google. Yes, I'm working on etcd. There's the etcd manager, which is actually, as you say, the more pressing problem in terms of Kops development work, and that is sort of, I think, on track.
Awesome.
So yeah, you'll be able to opt into etcd. The plan is you'll be able to opt into etcd manager in 1.10, and what that will allow you to do, if you choose to opt in, which is not necessarily a good idea, but if you choose to opt in, which fine for a test cluster, you can then move from between etcd versions and change the size of your etcd cluster, and your etcd cluster size is currently tied to your number of masters. So it's certainly been a common request for people to go from at least 1 to 3 masters is very common. And then people that decide their masters they need more masters than that for performance reasons to go to 5 or something like that. I would typically recommend scaling up rather than scaling out beyond 3, but each to their own, as it were. All right. Looks like we have reached happiness.
Thank you, Justin, for doing the 110 release.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Awesome. I wish everyone a happy weekend. Happy Friday. And see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks,
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.